Good day to you. And there it is, television. We have shows like this, game entertainment type show. We have shows like this, classic show from the 1970s, Matlock. This is a rerun. What do we have next? You have the Rachel Ray Show, a cooking show slash homemaking show slash fashion show. Commercial here. That's the, fourth channel we've tried with a commercial. And Tamron Hall. Yeah, not quite sure what that show is. So we've got 6 television channels that we took a look at there. All of them entertainment for the most part. Television itself coming into our households in so many ways. Coming in by cable, coming in by satellite, coming in by antenna, coming in by internet, and coming into so many rooms. TV in the family room, TV in the bedroom, TV maybe in the shower, maybe in the kitchen, maybe in the garage, probably in the basement, probably in kids' rooms. TV has a really strong presence in our lives. And that's what we're talking about here. And we're taking on chapter 8 now. We're taking on television, that piece of equipment, perhaps more than any others, that disrupts our actual living environment, right? Because we put it in our family room and we put it there first when we move into a new space, and then we arrange our furniture all around it, our couches, our chairs. We even have a piece of equipment that wasn't, furniture I should say, that wasn't invented until the television, and that's the coffee table, right? Made just for coffee. Really, it's made for snacks, chips, soda. That's what we think it's made for anyhow, and to put your feet up on when you're watching television. TV has changed so much, though, since its very beginnings, and that's what we're going to cover in this chapter today. So let's start off with the invention of television. It starts out in a farm field in Utah. Can you believe that? Television starts in a farm field in Utah. There was a farmer by the name of Philo, Phil. Philo was his first name, Philo Farnsworth. He was only 14 years old, driving a tractor out there in a Utah field, planting his seeds, going up and down the rows, day after day, after hour, minute after a minute. Lots of time to think about things. And he started to think about what would it be like to create a moving image, kind of like movies, but on a box like a TV screen, using the same technique that I'm using to drive my tractor. You're using lines of information rather than driving the tractor down rows of a TV set. That's what Philo Farnsworth did, and he decided to break light and darkness into these lines, and that would make up a picture. So he was the first person ever to successfully transmit a straight line in 1927. Woo woo woo! Big deal, right? Transmit a line. What's a big deal? Well, that was a big deal because that was transmitting. It was not a movie. It was not projecting it onto a screen. It was not the sound of a line like in radio. It was actually showing a visual image, projecting a line. By the way, Philo Farnsworth, was not the only one working on this kind of an invention. There was a Russian as well, Russian immigrant in the United States. His name was Vladimir Zworykin. He had a Ph.D. in engineering, and he was also coming up with his own TV set. You can look at both of their primitive inventions in the links for today. But Farnsworth got there first and filed a patent with the RCA. Remember that company, the Radio Corporation of America, set up after World War II to handle radio patents? Yeah. So Farnsworth gets a patent. He's the one that's known as the inventor of television. Now, without TV, you can't have broadcasting, so let's talk about the beginning of broadcasting. 1939 was the first significant television broadcast. You may recall that 1920 was when we had our first radio broadcast. Only 19 years later, now we are transmitting a visual image over the airwaves. I told you in the beginning part of this class that mass media accelerates very quickly in terms of the pace of inventions as we go further and further into life compared to when we first had our oral language 40,000 years ago, and then the written language didn't come along until just 3,500 years ago. It's a long gap. Now we have 19 years between radio and TV, and it only gets faster. Also, like radio, TV had a period after World War II. The manufacturing of television sets was suspended by the U.S. government. Patents were frozen. You could not get, licenses were frozen. You could not get a new TV station because licenses were frozen. And most stations went off the air because the U.S. government needed those resources to be devoted to making military armaments and not giving over TV patents to potentially to the enemy. So eventually, in 1952, that freeze was lifted and TV starts to come out of its hibernation, if you want to think of it that way, and it starts to become very, very important. And in fact, one of the first, we always find when a new invention comes on the scene that's mass media related, older inventions, ones that were there before the newer one, they resist the new one because they're afraid the audiences are going to be stolen. We saw that between newspapers and radio stations, right? And now we have a situation where restaurateurs, people who own restaurants, they did not like television at all in the 1950s because they felt that people would rush home from eating. Instead of spending a longer period of time in the restaurant, they would rush home to the television set. So how about that? Restaurateurs not liking television. Today, you cannot go into a bar without finding not just one, but many TV sets all over the bar areas. Some of the earliest shows in the beginning of broadcasting were variety shows like Milton Berle. You can take a look at that in the links today. Milton Berle of the Texas Star Theater. Texas, an oil and gas company, right? Still seeing vestiges of big oil companies in our American system here, even in the 1900s, and of course still there today, but different forms. And so we have the Texas Star Theater is basically a show that was sponsored by Texaco, the gas station and gas company Texaco. And that's the only advertiser you heard during the whole show. We also had Ed Sullivan. Ed Sullivan is another kind of a variety show host, television shows host, and these were some of the early shows in television. We still have those today in late night television. Now let's highlight a show that broke a lot of boundaries. It was called I Love Lucy in the 1950s. I Love Lucy. It's the longest lasting entertainment program in the 1950s, and it featured a very brash, as she was known, redhead named Lucille Ball. She was a comedian, and her husband, who was Cuban. Desi Arnaz was his name. And this was a show that broke ground because it was the first interracial marriage that was presented on TV between a white person and a Latino, Desi and Lucy. Also, it was the first show that was shot in front of a live audience. So actually, Lucy and Desi, they were shooting their show in New York originally, but they wanted to live in California, so they just moved the whole show to California, just like Hollywood moved to California. And they started shooting in front of a live audience with a laugh track. That's also something that they added, the laugh track. You see that in a lot of shows today, like Big Bang Theory, for example. It's still very present in getting audiences to laugh. Also, this was the first show that was syndicated. That means it was sold as reruns. It went off of the broadcast television channel, and then it was sold on to cable and other distribution outlets. Wow, let's talk about the arrival of color television. Now, we highlighted that for film in the last class. So networks, and by the networks I mean ABC, CBS, and NBC. Those were the three networks around in the 1950s. Even though color was invented in 1954, by 1959, 5 years later, only 3 television shows had color in it. Taking a really long time for color to get going, right? But finally, color catches on in the 1960s, and the network to go after it the most was NBC. You know NBC with the peacock imagery. You can see a link for that. Yeah, the peacock imagery, that's designed to showcase NBC's commitment to color, which was slow to catch on because of the expense, just like film. You need a color television set. You need color cameras to record. You need all kinds of other equipment just to reproduce color. Let's talk about cable and satellite television. Now, this is what really spread television to everybody's homes, wherever you are, regardless of your topography, so to speak, the terrain that you live in. So cable television was actually invented in Pennsylvania. It was invented in the mountains of Pittsburgh. The problem was getting a television signal when you're on the other side of the Allegheny Mountains from downtown Pittsburgh. And so cable was a way of getting the signal by hardwire instead of sending it through the air over a transmitter and antenna, sending it through hardwire to get it out there. And so that's what was developed. And one of the first companies to really explore cable television and later satellite television is a company that's still around today. It's HBO, otherwise known as the home box office, this is for home box office, first channel to provide programming via satellite. Yeah, pretty amazing. So you've got programming that's created in a studio, then it's sent by satellite up to a bird in the sky. This is a satellite. Sent by a transmitter up to this bird in the sky, which is a satellite, and then it's sent back down to a cable company like Blue Ridge Communication or Comcast Communication or uh, Select Electric. I forget the one that's in the Allentown area. And then that cable company distributes it to homes through hard wires. That's the complicated technical system we have going on here. It's pretty amazing. One of the very first entrepreneurs to explore this new infrastructure of cable, satellite, and TV all working together was Ted Turner. Ted Turner, at the age of 24, just out of college, he inherited a billboard company from his father in Atlanta, Georgia. Ted Turner did. And he decided with the money from that company that he was going to buy a TV station, WTBS. You recognize it, WTBS. And then he also bought the Atlanta Braves. And he also bought the Atlanta Hawks. So he bought a baseball team and he bought a basketball team. And then he used WTBS and a cable network to launch this programming across the United States. And it was the first what we call superstation, where TBS, even though it was located in Georgia, had a national audience because of this cable network that he was using. All the cables available to send out TBS programming, and that's why the Atlanta Braves is seen by many Americans to be their favorite team, because of TBS bringing the Braves to many people outside of Atlanta. But his real coup de grace, so to speak, was CNN. That's what Ted Turner invented, the cable news network. News all day long, using that same cable infrastructure. It's the first all-news channel. It made breaking news popular. And then there was a spin-off channel, HLN, or Headline News, and that's still on the air today as well. Ted Turner also bought the MGM movie library and the Hanna-Barbera cartoon library, including the Flintstones, the Jetsons, and Scooby-Doo. So Ted Turner became a very big dude riding the back of this new technology of cable, satellite, and television all put together. And numerous cable and satellite channels followed. BET, ESPN, the Weather Channel, just the whole explosion of cable, the cable channel system of getting television into houses. And on the cable system, we have cable networks like MTV and Nickelodeon. We have local access channels like Blue Ridge or TV13. We have pay-per-view movies. We have audio services. You can listen to any kind of genre of music that you want. We have the internet. You can get internet. I get internet in my home through my cable company. And we have security systems, security alarm systems wired into, our cable company. Now let's talk about the VCR, which we talked about last class during films because it also affected television. We know that by 1991 they were in VCRs 7 out of every 10 homes. Pretty amazing. And Universal Studios and Disney were not happy about the VCR. They felt that people were copying their content illegally, so they sued Sony. They sued Sony, which made the VCR. But in 1984, the Supreme Court said people have the right to record programming from television, even if that's a film being played on television. They have the right to record one copy for their own personal use. They can't sell it, they can't make multiple copies, but they can record one. Let's talk about digital television now. Television used to be analog, just like music, just like radio. But in 2009, the FCC being the Federal Communications Commission, forced television stations to turn off their analog signals and go to all digital. And so because of that technology, it led to other technologies that affect our TV viewing, like TiVo. TiVo is just copying from the VCR the ability to record in your home. That's what TiVo does, but it has another feature. You can skip past advertisements with a TiVo while also recording what shows that you want to watch. Also, we have video on demand. That wouldn't have been possible before digital television. You can go in and buy a film when you want. You can stop it and start it. You can watch it again. We also have HD TV. That's high definition, widescreen, ultra clear digital television. You can see a wrinkle on a person's face. That's all because of digital TV. The very first digital broadcast was in 1998, before the millennium. It was the Space Shuttle Discovery that was launched. That was the first national digital TV broadcast. Let's talk now about television as an industry going from broadcasting to narrowcasting. So we'll start first with the broadcasting side of things. So on the broadcasting side of things, that's where you're reaching as big as audience as possible. The system that is in place for many years and still in place, but is also weakened compared to how it was before because cable provides more competition. The system that is in place is the network to affiliate relationship, which I've already discussed in another class. And that's where you have a studio producing content, could be radio or TV, and then you have an affiliate like WNEP in Scranton Wilkes-Barre, which is an ABC affiliate getting content from the ABC studios. Did you know that the network pays the affiliate to carry the network's programming? Did you know that Big Bang Theory is being, the stations that are carrying that across the US are being paid to carry that? Why is that? It's because the business model has it so that when the network sells Big Bang Theory, they include in it like 12 minutes of advertising. And those 12 minutes are from network sold advertising, or at least 10 minutes or 11 minutes are. So the network gets the lion's share of that advertising block to advertise for products that the network has sold, Geico Insurance, McDonald's, whatever. And then the local station, the affiliate, may get 1 minute or 2 minutes of those 12 minutes. That's why the network pays the affiliate. It's sort of the big model of mass media. And it says broadcasting. It says try and get the content out to as many people across the United States as possible. Now, narrowcasting has more to do with not going for the biggest audience possible, but going for a select audience. And so the next thing we want to talk about is public broadcasting. Public broadcasting, it's not meant to be for everybody, but it is an important function of broadcasting and of life in general, because public broadcasting provides valuable educational information for young people and for adults. It provides high culture. And public broadcasting gets television to rural areas where other more competitive, profit-making radio and TV stations don't feel that they should go because there's no profit in it. So there actually is a law to establish public broadcasting. It's 1968. In 1968, the government passed the Public Broadcasting Act. And it basically sets aside a system so that public TV can be provided and also public radio. Public TV is provided by PBS, the Public Broadcasting System, Sesame Street, and all the rest of it. And NPR, National Public Radio, is the radio side of public broadcasting, providing shows like Morning Edition, that's on NPR. Now let's move to the Fox network as our final point in going from broadcasting to narrowcasting. Rupert Murdoch, you may recall, was an Australian citizen, came to the United States. He bought 20th Century Fox. He bought a bunch of other not well-performing television stations and formed the Fox network. And he rolled out that network with two controversial shows, The Simpsons and Married with Children. The Simpsons is still going. Married with Children is long off the air. You can see clips of Married with the Children. And what he did was he basically said that television programming, commercial television programming, is not going to be for everybody. It's going to be for a niche audience. We don't care if we offend people with Married with Children or The Simpsons. We just want that young, edgy, socially liberal crowd. That's what we want. And so broadcasting and television has gone to the narrowcasting. It's not necessarily going for the biggest audience, although the Super Bowl still tries to do that. The Olympics tries to do that, but virtually every other program is going for a narrow audience. Now let's talk about ratings. Just like film, TV has ratings, but it's not the same thing. The ratings in film are used to give people a heads up about what the content's going to be like. Ratings in television are different. Ratings are numbers that are provided by usually one company called the Nielsen Company. And those numbers show how many people are watching your television shows or your television station. And it shows what kinds of characteristics describe these people, like their ages, their genders, their income, their education level, their ethnicity, where they live. All that is measured by the Nielsen Company. They use a device called the Personal People Meter, PPM, and it's a device that measures your TV watching and sends it into the headquarters of Nielsen in Washington, D.C. And then lots of numbers are produced. You wouldn't believe there are whole stacks of numbers that are produced on audiences that are then taken to Geico and all the other advertisers. But the two biggest numbers are the rating and the share. Those are the two biggest numbers that are used when advertising executives go out to sell advertising time, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. They say, here's the rating of this last Super Bowl. Here's what we think this year's Super Bowl is going to be like. Let's talk about diversity in television now. Similar to movies, television has been criticized for not being diverse. If you look at the 2017 breakdown of the U.S. population, ethnicity wise, 61% of our population was white. 61%, 17.8% was Hispanic. Hispanic, 17.8%, just less than 20%. African American, 13.1%. African American, 13.1%. Asian, 5.7%. More than one race, which increasingly people identify as, 2.6%. American Indian, 1.3%. And Pacific Islander, 0.2%. If you look at television shows, they're not showing that. In fact, there's a lot of whitewashing that has gone on, and it's less so, but you still have white people who are, advancing the causes of black and Asian and Latino people rather than those people themselves. The ultimate whitewashing was David Carradine, the American actor David Carradine, who played a Chinese person in the 1970s series called Kung Fu. David Carradine, white guy, exemplifying whitewashing there. We are seeing more ethnicities, but we're not seeing the same levels of representation as we see ethnicities represented in our general population. And when we see ethnicities represented, they are not always in the most flattering role. I mean, the TV show Cops, I don't know how it was allowed to exist for so long. It finally was taken off the air during the Black Lives last couple years movement. No, 3 years ago, I would say it was taken off the air because almost every criminal in the early versions of that show was black. Not the police officers, the criminals. So been a lot of changes. Look at a Cops episode now. It's back on the air, and it's got a lot more diversity. It had to come back and retool itself because of the criticism. There are Spanish language networks to move away from diversity and talk about some advances that we have, to move away from lack of diversity and talk about advances that we've had. We've got Univision. Univision is a very big Spanish language television network. It's out of Florida. And we also have a second network called Telemundo. Telemundo, our students in our communication department have served in internships at Telemundo. Univision is the 5th largest network in the country, actually, behind Fox. ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, and then Univision. So that says a lot. The most common form of programming that is Latino, goes around the world, is called the telenovela. The telenovela, which stands for telenovel. Telenovel, it's like fiction. It's a soap opera. That's what the telenovela is. And the most famous one was the Ugly Betty telenovela. It ran in 2006, 2007. ABC brought that in. It was originally, I believe, a Brazilian telenovela. We also have black entertainment television leading the way for African Americans on cable television. BET, founded by Robert Johnson. He borrowed his money using a napkin as a way of presenting his business plan to his investor. You should check out his story. I've got a video clip of him. The black entertainment television for black people, and largely programming black people in the content of black entertainment television, just like Berry Gordy and Motown Records. Now let's move to TV and society. There's an author who wrote a book called Tube of Plenty, Tube being the television, and his name is Eric Barno. Eric Barno, Tube of Plenty. He said that TV has had a revolutionary impact on society that is bigger than the Gutenberg printing press. Wow. I mean, you can think about that for yourself. His chief arguments that TV has had a bigger impact on society than the Gutenberg printing press is, number one, it takes no skill to use it. Anybody can use a TV. There's virtually no literacy required. And secondly, you can start it from birth. As soon as you open your eyes into this world, you can start television. Neither of those can be said about the Gutenberg printing press. You can think for yourself, but we watch a lot of TV in our lives. TV's on for more than 4 hours a day in the average American household, according to the Nielsen Company. And during prime time, which is 8 o'clock at night till 11 o'clock at night, at any given time during that time period, 1/3 of the entire audience out there is watching TV. 1/3 of the American population that can watch TV is watching TV. And all the while, TV is competition for all these other things we should be doing, like homework or going to work or paying attention to our spouses or exercising. In fact, you can say that TV is almost anti-exercise because it gets you to want to eat on snacks and lay down while you're watching it. Now let's talk about how the standards for television have changed. They have. over the years. In the 1950s and 60s, television was much more conservative. There was a show called Mary Tyler Moore, and her show was with Dick Van Dyke was her husband. Mary Tyler Moore was the wife. Dick Van Dyke was a comedian in his own right. I think he's still alive. Might not be, I'm not sure. And Mary Tyler Moore, comedian, they had a show, the Mary Tyler Moore Show. They were married on the show, but they were shown sleeping in separate beds. That wasn't allowed. And Lucille Ball, remember her? She had to use the word expecting instead of pregnant. When she actually got pregnant in life, she couldn't use the word. They wrote it into the show, and she had to use the word expecting because pregnant was seen as too vivid. So in 1997, the broadcasters implemented a two-part rating system. It's really about appeasing advertisers. It's not really about the American public having, Puritan morals. It's really about advertisers not wanting their advertised products being associated with dirty programming. And so in 1997, TV came up with some standards. G, PG, TV-14, TV-MA, S for sex, V for violence, L for crude language. I don't know why the L is there, I guess language. D for adult dialogue. You can decide if it works for yourself. There's the famous show, the famous halftime show in 2004 on television. 2004 where Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake did a dance routine and Janet Jackson's piece of clothing was pulled away to expose her breasts. It was all choreographed. It wasn't an accident. There were lots of lawsuits about that, and the FCC eventually ended up fining all of the CBS TV affiliates for carrying lewd or offensive content. We're going to have a whole class, by the way, on media law, where we also talk about obscenity when we get later on in the course. So let's look at the future of television now. Let's look at television. We know that television, in many ways, is not even going to be called television anymore. I mean, what you're watching on your phone is very much what you watch at night. You're watching your phone and your laptop, and they have different dimensions in television, but we also watch TV shows on our phones and our laptops too. So we know that the whole concept of television is going to change, and it's going to be seen more as a screen, more as a phone, more of a laptop. We know that's going to happen. We know that there's going to be more streaming. I mean, the pandemic certainly accelerated streaming. People did a lot of binge watching. We know that people are cutting the cable. It's very expensive. Whether it will become as expensive to stream once the streamers have you remains to be seen. We know that we're going to be working around screens. I mentioned those earlier in this section, but I just want to now highlight those a little bit more. I want to say that in our field, communication, we talk about people as being on their first screen, their second screen, or their third screen. The first screen is the first screen you wake up to. That's your phone. The second screen is your laptop. That third screen is your television in many cases. But regardless, it says that we spend so much of our lives on screens, and television is certainly going to have a central role in that. Have a great day.